Lecture 4. Use Case Modeling. Writing Use Case Description. At the end of this session, you should be able to list the main components of a use case description, identify scenarios of a use case, describe main flow and alternate flows of a use case. In the previous session, we have seen how we can use a use case model to model the system's functional requirements. The functional requirements specify the user goals. However, what goes on in each of these use cases? Can you tell from the use case model? Obviously not. Hence, for each use case, it must accompany with a use case description. Use cases have internal complexity. So what are these complexity? The sequence of steps to execute business process to achieve the user's goal. There might be several variations that might exist within a single use case. For example, when you place an order, the step might vary is the customer a registered member who is entitled to privileges? If that is the case, how would you handle this particular situation? Each of this scenario or each of this variation is called a scenario. It represents a possible situation that may arise when executing a use case. It is ultimately very important for you to identify all possible scenarios because when you implement the system must be able to handle all these scenarios. So what does the use case description include? Each use case description accompanied with a detailed use case description, the information normally comes from the information gathered during the requirement. So both of these combined together, will provide the use case description. So what goes on in the use case description? Each use case description must have the use case name. This use case name is a result-oriented name for the use case as it appears in your use case diagram. You can include a use case ID. This use case ID is a unique identifier as specified by the organization so that function requirements can be tracked. Then, there is a use case description. This description describes the reason for and the outcome of this use case. It might include a high-level description of the sequence of actions. You can also specify the outcome of executing the use cases. And it could include the input data required, their description, any business rules and constraints. Then, you might include the primary actor. As described in the previous session, the primary actor is someone who triggers or initiates the use case, often called the initiator. You might also include the secondary actor, the actor that interacts with the use case after it is triggered, sometimes also called a participator. Following that will be your preconditions. So what are preconditions? Preconditions are activities that must have taken place or any conditions that must be true before the use case can be started. After the preconditions comes the post-conditions. The post-conditions list the state of the system at the conclusion of the use case execution. The most important part of the use case description is the main flow. The main flow will list the user's actions and system responses that will take place during the execution of the use case under normal expected conditions. The sequence actions and response will ultimately lead to accomplishing the goal stated in the use case name and the description. Following the main flow are the alternate flows. The alternate flows, as previously stated, are the scenarios. These document other legitimate usage scenarios that can take place within the use case. Each flow should normally be preceded with a scenario name. In each of these alternate flows, you should also list the user actions and the system responses for these alternate scenarios. Guidelines for writing use case description. UML does not provide any standard rules for writing detailed use case descriptions. When you Google on the internet, you'll find many different types of variations and ways that people write use case description. But for the purpose of this module, we will provide certain guidelines which you should follow. So these guidelines that you should adhere to are: use simple grammar. Example, librarian enters the book ID instead of the book ID is entered by the librarian. The system displays the book detail rather than the book detail are displayed by the system. Each of these statements should clearly show who is in control at any point in time. So always start with the actor. Hence, the actor must be replaced with the actor's name in the use case. The actor name obviously can be found in your use case diagram. Then, the system. Example, the customer enters the quantity to purchase. The system adds items into the order list. However, do not impose constraints on user interface, because at this point you might not actually have any idea what the user interface is going to look like. So do not write things such as user clicks on OK button to submit personal details. Instead, you should put user submits personal detail to the system. So here are some guidelines. For instance, when you want to indicate how users do inputs by entering data via the keyboard. This is what you could normally do. The actor enters, the actor submits, then the system validates, followed by the system verifies. If you have actor inputting data by selecting data from a list provided by the system, then this is how you would normally phrase the use case description sequence. The system retrieves a list of, the system displays the list of, the actor then selects, etc. Then the actor submits. If selection is compulsory, then the system might validate the selection. After the validation, then the system might be able to do and continue with other actions. Some of the system responses in response to the actor actions are as follows. The system computes, the system prints, the system triggers, or the system creates, insert, update, deletes, or display. By following the simplest guideline, you could write use case description fairly simply. Here is an example of a use case description template. However, you do not have to draw the boundaries or format it in such a table. What you can see are the use case component on the left-hand column, the use case ID, the use case name, and sometimes you might even want to include created by and the date created. This could track the use case as written by who and when is the latest version. Here's another example with some detail of a use case. This is a use case called login. Here you can see a use case ID, ACC_UC_1. As stated previously, this use case ID does not have to follow any particular format. Normally this is indicated by individual organization. So in this case, it might be an account_UseCaseDescription1. As you can see in the description, it actually gives you a high-level description of what this use case is supposed to do, what the outcome of this use case is, as well as what the data are required, and if there are any business rules. For instance, the user only have a maximum of 3 attempts to log in, after which their account are locked, and they will have to contact the system administrator to unlock their account upon successful login into the system. Then the system will display the user homepage. Here are the details of the main flow and the alternate flow. Take note of the alternate flow where each alternate flow have a scenario name. So how does these particular steps number arise from? For instance, if let's say we have now the system verifies the staff ID. Note that this is actually step 4. What if the system fails to verify the staff ID and the password? What this means is that if the system go and retrieve the information from the database and the staff ID does not match with the password, so in this particular case, the alternate flow will be step 4A, invalid staff ID or password. And following the scenario name are the steps by which the systems or the actor has to do. The system will display invalid stub ID and password, and the system will prompt for the stub ID and password. What happens if you have use cases which extends or include another use case as shown in this diagram here? Here, we can see that take customer order is a base case. Then we have a take product specific requirement, which is an extending use case, extending the base case take customer order. And take customer order use case includes, okay, the retrieve customer details use case. So how do you write this in a use case description? Following other examples will illustrate how you write such situations. This is the base case, which is the take customer order. In this particular case, we might actually have a new header called include use cases. And this particular include use case column, we will have retrieve customers detail. And at this particular point in the main flow, we can indicate the point at which the use case is needed. Hence, the way to write this is the system triggers the retrieve customer details use case. Here, we also illustrate how you can write repetition steps. If you have a series of steps that need to be repeated, then all you have to do is to indicate as follows. Repeat step number 1 to number 1 for all products. We normally do not use repeat until nor for such and such construct. This is an extend base case description. So this is again the base case take customer order. Okay, and when in the use case description in the main flow, we have to indicate the point at which the extending use case might be triggered. And this is how you indicate it, by using the phrase extension point, take product specific requirements. Then when we are writing the extending use case, in this case, the take product specific requirement use case, then in this case, we might actually put that this particular use case, the product specific requirement, which use case it extends. It extends the take customer order use case. So if you include the extend and the include use case header, this is what the complete use case description might look like. Hence, in this session, we have seen what are use case scenarios. We have also looked at the components of each use case description. The use case description describes the flow of each use case. An alternate flow, a path of the main flow that captures errors, branches, and interruptions. The include and extend use cases are included in the main flow description.